So the first module that we'll be presenting today is the energy question. The question they were answering throughout this term was, what would Japan's future energy plan look like from the point of view of various stakeholders? Those stakeholders groups included the government, a public energy utility, an environmental NGO, and the general public. In this process, the students developed a strategic energy plan and created it in different groups from the perspectives of various stakeholders. Please welcome Julie, Quiva, Aurelia, and Thomas, who will be joining me on stage.
プレゼンテーションがみんなが来る前にちょっとちらっと言いますね。まず最初のプレゼンテーションは、エネルギーに関しての、課題プロジェクトですね。で、さまざまな利害関係の視点から日本の将来のエネルギー計画はどのようなものかという問いに対していろいろ答えを見つけていこうというのがテーマでプロジェクトをしてきました。で、その学生さんたちは、エネルギーが政治的、文化的、社会的、または地理的な要因でどのように機能しているか、また違ったグループ、政府であるとか、貿易の電気会社であるとか、環境 NGO の人々がどういうふうに携わっているかということを学んできました。この過程でさまざまな利害関係の観点から戦略的なエネルギー計画をどのように発展させるか、作り上げていったらいいかということを学びました。ということで、こちらが今回エネルギーのことを勉強してこられた皆さんです。プレゼンをリードしてくださるのが、What was your name again? Julia? Julie and Quiva? Quiva. ジュリーさんとクイバさんというのをお話しくださいます。
So hello, my name is Julie Gatineau and I'm from France. And I'm Quiva and I am from Ireland and we are part of the energy module. Throughout the 6 weeks we have been looking at energy usage in Japan as well as in a global context. So throughout the term we have gone on various excursions and met with various guest speakers to learn more about the energy landscape in Japan.
So the two final projects for our module are energy-related games that you'll be able to see in the expo later on, as well as 4 different energy plans that are based on the perspectives of different stakeholders. So those stakeholders were the government, public utilities, an environmental NGO, and a public citizen. So before we get into details about the module and what we did in the energy plans and all of that, we just wanted to ask you guys a little bit about what you think are the best energy sources and the types of energy that you think are best.
So does anyone have an idea of what Japan could base their energy off of?
If you had to pick the best option, what does anyone want to raise their hand and have an idea?
We saw a lot of solar yesterday as we came on the trains in Tokyo.
Well, it's not nuclear energy, right? Okay, so do your thing.
Yes.
Geothermal.
Geothermal.
I think we'll talk about that later.
Okay, first of all, we're going to talk about nuclear. Yes.
Thomas.
So I know nuclear energy, it is, although it is a very good option for it doesn't emit any CO2 emissions, and it is one of the most independent energy sources for Japan. If you were to start basing the whole entire energy plan off of nuclear, you would have a huge upset from the Japanese public, and if you started basing more and more nuclear plants on that, you would create a lot of nuclear waste. And if you needed to create more energy and you don't have enough nuclear plants, then it would take 30 to 20 years to create a brand new one.
So does anybody else have an idea?
What it should be or what it shouldn't be?
What it should be.
Well, geothermal.
We were hoping to learn from you.
Okay, so solar does seem like a perfect source of energy to use in a perfect world. But however, unfortunately, it can't be the main source of energy in Japan because it is not a stable source of energy. So some reasons it's not stable would be the climate, the weather, and then most importantly, the lack of land Japan has to produce the energy. So an example of this was when we went to visit a solar power plant, the land was 200,000 square meters of land, but it only produced 4,500 approximately. It was only able to households every year. So that just shows that it's not a stable, it won't be a stable source of energy for Japan to use.
So it's not solar. Does anybody else have any ideas? Jack?
What about oil?
So it's not oil, and so as most of you know, crude oil is a natural resource that can be found in lots of places all over the world, but it's a resource that takes millions of years to form, and yeah, it's non-renewable, so as we go on using it, the supplies are running out, and so yeah, we won't be able to use it forever. And that's not just Japan, it's just in general. And yeah, another thing with oil is that as you burn it, it produces a lot of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, which obviously contributes to climate change. And yeah, we don't want that.
Okay, does anyone have any, doing this too? Xavier? No, it is not wind. So wind is not feasible for Japan due to the lack of wind currents that pass through, and also it takes up a lot of space. So for farms, to have wind farms like wind turbines, those take up a lot of room, and it also hurts the environment. Right now we're living in an age where environmental protection is what citizens value most, and these wind turbines are actually killing birds as they're going through their migration patterns. And so that's why as of now, it only accounts for 1.7% of Japan's current energy production.
Does anyone else have an idea of the last source? It could be Aurora. You had an interesting opinion on this earlier. Please tell me.
Coal, you say? Wow, funny you mentioned that. Let me talk to you about the love-hate relationship we have with coal power. Coal power produces a lot of energy for a relatively small amount of fuel that it uses, and it is like sort of cheap compared to other energy sources that you can use. And with new technology coming on the market, such as IGCC power plants, more on that later in our game, it's becoming a very efficient way to make a lot of energy. However, it is a fossil fuel and thereby a limited resource. It also releases a lot of CO2 emissions and greenhouse gases while producing this energy. Lastly, Japan itself has very little of its own coal, so it has to be imported, which is not an ideal situation to be in. Now you all might be confused. If it's not any of those solutions, then what could be the solution? This depends on your stakeholder group. So yeah, now we're just gonna have two of the stakeholder groups talk about their energy plan and the solutions that they found for Japan.
Right. Hi, I'm Julia. I'm from Italy. This is Estelle from the US, and this is Scott from Ecuador. So we're going to be presenting our energy plan from the stakeholder group of the Public Utilities Company.
Okay, so to really understand energy as a whole, you first have to look at it through the context of the country where you're in. So this was the first step that we took as a module, and the first step that we needed to take in our plan. So Japan's energy right now is undergoing a lot of significant change because they're trying to reach their goals, which they set for the year 2030. So Japan intends to have 56% of their energy be provided by fossil fuels 20 to 22% nuclear and 22 to 24% renewable energy by the year 2030. And as you can see, they have to make a really big change, especially when it comes to fossil fuels, because as of now, 83% of their energy is produced by fossil fuels, which include crude oil and coal. So something that really marked the energy landscape as well here in Japan is the Fukushima nuclear accident in 2011 after the earthquake. So it is because of this accident that there's very high resistance to nuclear energy being used within the country. However, nuclear energy is really key to maintaining a stable source of energy here in Japan due to the lack of resources that it has, because it heavily relies on the imports of other countries to provide their energy. As of 2016, 40% of their imports are of crude oil, and they come from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. And as a whole, Japan is the 4th largest importer and the 4th largest exporter as a country.
So right now, the Japanese government is basing its energy plan off of the 3E+S priorities. So that means economic efficiency, energy security, safety, and the environment. So in our energy plan, we chose our first priority to be economic efficiency. So for our plan to be economically efficient, we had to tie in the other 3 priorities, but we chose to prioritize the environment last.
More on that later.
So in the next part of our plan, we outlined some specific actions. So these are 2 pages in our plan that are just an example of 2 different sources that we looked into more. So the first would be sunlight and wind, which kind of checks the box for our stakeholder on the environment because it's less of a priority for us. And so, as you can see in these graphs, that in the south of Japan, they receive the most sunlight, and in the north of Japan, they receive the most wind, which is, these 2 sources of energy are a problem for Japan because they lack the space, and their geography doesn't lend itself well to them. But if we could utilize these spaces by implementing solar panels in the south and wind in the north, then we could try to harness some of that power while also taking into consideration the environment. And then next up we had nuclear, which we looked into. And so following the Fukushima disaster, as Julie was saying, that is a problem because there's a lot of safety concern regarding nuclear power as an energy source. However, it is extremely efficient economically, which is our main priority. And after a lot of safety improvements and advancements, it actually is making a comeback in Japan, and it is really important for the regions in Japan where renewable energy can't be used as well.
So a big part of our energy plan was finding feasible solutions to the Japan's energy context, and as I had said before, they rely a lot on fossil fuels. So one of the technologies that we found while we were doing our expeditions and our research was this integrated coal gasification technology. So what this does is it gasifies the coal instead of burns it, and what this does, it increases the efficiency when harnessing the energy that is produced by coal, because when you pulverize the coal, you only get 40% of the energy produced that is actually functional to distribute for public consumption. But with the new technology, that raises to 55%. And when we came to talking about our priorities, that was the main difference between all our stakeholder groups, because each stakeholder had a different priority in mind. So the reason that we decided to put economic efficiency at the top of our priorities is because as a public energy company, public utility company, our main focus is to be able to provide you the most energy and with the least amount of blackouts within a year. So that's the main focus of us. And the reason that we focused on economic efficiency was because the only way that we can make sure that we can do that is by having a stable amount of income and revenue to invest in technologies such as this one. And also the reason that we put environment last was because as a public utility company, since our main focus is just providing you the energy, we're just trying to find the best way to do that. And as we know, even though nuclear power is a source that can be very dangerous to the environment, as well as coal because of CO2 emissions, since our main focus is just to provide you the energy, we just try to find the best and most stable way to do that.
So we designed these two graphs based on the technology that Scott was talking about before. So the one on the left is what we believe the percentages per energy source would be if we didn't use the clean coal technology. And the one on the right is if we did use the clean coal technology. So as you can see, the percentage of LNG decreases by 11%, and the other three increase to 30%.
So the last part of our plan was just drawing a conclusion. And so here you can see that the first step for us was just identifying what our priorities were and why they were what they were, based on our specific stakeholder group. And then we set out and started to define some actions that we would be taking. And that is also an important part of a plan because it shows that you actually are going to act on what you say that you're proposing. And so then after that, we used a lot of graphs and did a lot of research that then backed up what we were saying and what we wanted to use for our actions. And then as you can see that all of these measures will help utility companies, which was our stakeholder, enter the market for a more secure, efficient, and environmentally friendly future in Japan.
Hello, my name is David, and this is Maria. We represented the environmental NGO stakeholders throughout the energy module, and our energy plan looks very different than the public utilities plan because our priority is environmental protection.
Okay, so first of all, to make a Japan-specific energy plan, of course we had to focus on the context of Japan. So one good example would be, for example, that Japan doesn't have any natural resources, or at least not a lot of them, for example, fossil fuels. So, which sounds like a disadvantage both for us as an NGO. This was actually an advantage because then we could tell people, oh yeah, but Japan doesn't have any of the fossil fuels, so it would make more sense to invest into renewables. So this is actually, even though it sounds like something that is a disadvantage, for us it was something good. Then another thing we noticed, we'll be walking with our module, looking through Handori, that all the doors were open and everywhere heating and music and lights, which really seems like a very not energy efficient use of the energy. But then later on we learned that actually here in Japan the normal citizens are very energy consciousness. So we actually learned that even though there's a big contrast between the commercial sector and the normal the normal citizens, which we then used for our energy plan to make it more specific.
Like the utilities companies, we defined our priorities based on the 3E+S methodology, and our first priority, of course, was environmental protection. The NGO is always looking to protect the environment, so that was our top priority, and all of them kind of branch out of that one. So energy security comes on second, and then at the end comes economic efficiency and safety. And the priorities within those sub-priorities all relate back to environmental protection because the goal of the NGO is to keep the environment protected. So they are all ultimately connected. And the big ones in general are renewable energy, no nuclear energy, and energy storage research, which would be a big thing to make renewable energy actually feasible. And so to find this information, we, like at the beginning, we kind of struggled because environmental NGOs are not very big in Japan. So it was kind of hard kind of finding information at the beginning and actually really defining what NGOs in Japan would want the energy plan to look like. So that was really interesting.
So based on this information, we then made our energy plan, our long-term goals. So here you can see on the graph, this is the first graph, it is for 2017, so this would be the current status. We used 2017 because we couldn't find a lot of data on 2018 or 2019 because it's too early to get that, which also leads back to one of our problems, finding good data in English when you can't speak Japanese about Japan was kind of a problem. Then this one is for 2030, how you can see renewable energy is now would be 45%. We do that because of course we are the NGOs, so we want to invest into renewable. But we still, like one of our goals was still to use nuclear, just because it's a more stable energy, so it doesn't fluctuate as much as renewable with like climate and day-nighttime zone, and it still doesn't produce greenhouse gases. It kind of seems counterproductive for an NGO, but we had to use it because it's already there, so it would make sense, and it's also because it's like kind of like a step forward to 2060, which would be 100% renewables. We choose 2060 instead of something nearer because we didn't know exactly when the technology to make this all feasible would be available. For example, to make this all like possible, we would need to have like new energy storages and new systems. And even though it's an NGO, we still have to see like the drawbacks of this, which would be that even with 100% renewable energy, it wouldn't be 100% environmentally friendly, because things as how the other group already mentioned, wind energy, for example, it destroys the natural habitat of birds, or the elements used in solar panels are actually kind of very dangerous for the environment, so there will always be kind of an environmental drawback, and we as the NGO also had to see this.
And same with the graph at the bottom, it was a big issue for us finding a way to make the plan feasible, because at the end the environmental NGO wanted 100% completely renewable energy as like what Japan should produce as their energy, which was really hard to come up with an actual plan, just because it's almost impossible for Japan to do that. But with the research that we made and also trying to implement new technologies and researching new technologies, we kind of found a way to get that. And so these are some of the solutions some of the suggestions that we made for Japan, as in like where they could use up their renewable energy potential. And so we created this map. We compiled a map with the renewable energy potential in Japan, so where could solar plants best be placed, where could wind power plants best be placed, and then we researched each of the areas, and we created 4 different suggestions for renewable energy, which are all part of our ultimate plan at the end, which also includes short-term and long-term actions. Thank you.
So, as you can see, hopefully you saw how much we've learned throughout these 6 weeks, and it was all thanks to everyone that we visited, either being the energy company, and the solar people, and especially thank you to Yuko, our translator, and the other Yuko who planned all of this, and Richard Forrest, and Damien, and thank you all very much. And hopefully in the expo, which is later on in the showcase, you can see 3 of our games that we have created throughout this